And let me get other stuff out of the way. So welcome everyone. I'm Dr. Sheila Jackson. I'm director of our Department of Family and Community Partnerships, and it's truly a pleasure to welcome you all to this very important session, mental health resources in Prince George's County Public Schools and the community. Mental health is a priority for our superintendent, and we wanted to make sure that we got the experts in our school system in front of you so that they can share information that can help you help your students. So we have simultaneous interpretation available. And if you see it on the screen, and I'm going to ask Mr. Ortiz, would you please share this in Spanish, just how to access the simultaneous interpretation?
Of course, yes. Muchas gracias a todos por estar aquí presente en nuestra reunión de esta noche. Si usted quiere traducción en español, por favor de seguir lo siguiente. Si está usted en una computadora, en la parte baja de la pantalla habrá un globo de interpretación. Haga clic en ese globo y seleccione a donde dice Spanish. Ahora bien, si usted está en un dispositivo móvil, su teléfono, entonces haga lo siguiente. En la parte baja de la pantalla, toca el icono de elipse. En la parte baja derecha, toque el lenguaje interpretation y después toque donde dice Spanish. De esta manera podrá oír esta reunión en español.
Gracias, Mr. Ortiz. And so we'll give folks just a couple of seconds to get into simultaneous interpretation, and then we will keep moving forward. Again, thank you for being here. In the chat, I've already dropped the link. We ask everyone to help us take attendance for the evening. And so I'm not sure, something just jumped out of place, but we will fix this and drop it back into the chat. It's actually the lighter blue one that's going to be the one that you click on, but it'll be in the chat box. And we ask that everyone please join us to take attendance, because that helps us with our data about who our participants are tonight. So again, thank you for that. So we have a few norms that we'll just go over quickly. We invite you to please turn your cameras on, but keep your microphones off until you're asked to unmute and to share or to talk. We invite you to please participate freely. We're going to hear some very important information, and we want to listen well, but if we have questions, we want you to be able to ask questions too. When it's time to ask questions, we ask that you share succinctly so that others can ask questions or have feedback as well. Then, if you have questions, we ask that you write those in the chat box so that we can keep the presentation moving smoothly, and then our presenters will come back to answer any questions that are asked. So can I get a thumbs up from everybody if you got that? We really appreciate you. And at the end of our meeting, we'll drop a link into the chat. We ask that you evaluate this session so that we can all have that feedback. Thank you. So this is who we are in the Department of Family and Community Partnerships. We serve all 204 schools in the district, all offices, but we're a small and mighty team. We have our specialists, and we are so happy to serve and support our parent engagement assistants. And so some of them are actually on the call with us tonight. Wonderful individuals who keep the message and the training for family engagement alive in our schools, and we appreciate them. And we need you, parents. You are your child's first teacher. We need you as partners working to make sure that we provide everything that we can for all children so that they can be successful. Family engagement is one of the pillars of our school system, and it's very important that we celebrate you and provide as much support and resources as we can for you. So thank you for being here. This is our agenda for tonight, our presentation. I'm turning right over in just a minute. It's about mental health resources in PGCPS and the community. And an overview, if you register for this, you've probably received this overview, but it's going to talk about all the things that we do at Prince George's County Public Schools to support families and students around the area of mental health and wellness. So there are valuable resources, there are lots of tips for how to discuss mental health, and and just to know what kind of supports you can reach out to. I always encourage parents to not be afraid to reach out to get the kind of support and help that we need as parents to help our children. So on that note, I'm going to turn things over to our presenters. We have Emily Pasco and the Shannon Bell from our mental health office in the school system. And I'm sure they're going to tell you more accurate information than my quick introduction. I just want to turn things over to these wonderful, brilliant people in Prince George's County. So welcome.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. It's an honor to be here. I'm Emily Pasco, one of the mental health coordinators for Prince George's County Public Schools. So we are a team of 3. There's 3 mental health coordinators in our district at this time, and we really have focused on emphasizing mental health and its importance. So we train our professional school counselors, our school psychologists, and our mental health clinicians in the PGCPS procedures that we have in place to support student mental health and intervene in the instances of crises, things like that. And we also collaborate with many of our community partners, which we'll get into the presentation. But I'll let Shannon introduce herself as well.
So I am Shannon Bell, and I'm the newest mental health coordinator. I joined PG in December, and I'm excited to be here. And as Emily stated, we have a third partner. Her name is Audrey. So thank you for having us, Dr. Jackson.
Yes, we are delighted to share some information and resources with you. But first, we wanted to get started with somewhat of a meditation. So it's called a body scan meditation, and it's a quick prompt. I know Dr. Jackson likes cameras on and to see faces, but the purpose of this particular exercise is for you to be comfortable and to really focus on your body and your thoughts and how that makes your body feel. So we're going to take a minute, and if you'd like to turn your camera off, that's perfectly fine. And I'm just going to go through a body scan script. So please get comfy and we'll get started. So let's begin by taking a moment to allow your body to settle into a comfortable position. You may close your eyes or keep them slightly open, willing the spine to lift, the shoulders to soften. Today we will practice a short body scan. Checking in with our bodies helps to settle the mind and notice what physiological sensations and emotions might be present. Begin by taking a full breath in and a long breath out. Now, bringing awareness to the top of your body, your head, face, neck, and shoulders. Noticing any sensations, movements, or any places of holding or tension. Now moving down to the arms and the hands, sensing the back of the body and the front of the body. Sensing yourself seated, feeling the contact of your body with the chair or the cushion. Now sensing your upper legs, your lower legs, and the feet. Noticing if there are any particular places that call out for attention, places where sensations feel most vibrant or dynamic. Scanning to see if there are places where there is a lack of sensations or only very faint sensations. Now sensing the whole body breathing. One complete organism. Finishing with a full deep breath in and a long breath out. So now that we've done our body scans, hopefully while we're in a place of comfort and ease while we go into some of these topics. And we, Shannon and I acknowledge that, and I'm sure Dr. Jackson as well, there's a lot going on in the world right now, and it can be very overwhelming for many people, a lot of changes and a lot of discomfort. So we as a district are really focusing on how to support people through those changes, and especially as it relates to mental health and safety. So some of these topics, may be difficult for you to think about, or you may have personal experiences that we talk about here, whether related to loved ones or yourself. So please take care of yourselves. If it becomes too much, please give yourself permission to step away. This is being recorded, so it's going to be accessible to you at a later date. So if you are not in the time or space to be able to receive this information, that's okay. So just wanted to mention that first before we really dig into the content. But with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Shannon.
Good evening again, everyone. So just want to take a pulse of everybody who is currently here and just drop in the chat what your awareness about mental health issues are. So Dr. Jackson, will you go back one more slide to slide 12? There we go. So when we think about like mental health, where do you feel like you fall on the continuum? So in the chat, you're going to drop a 1 if you feel like you're an expert in mental health and mental health resources available. A 2 if you know a little bit, or a 3 if you don't know anything about this topic at all. So it looks like we have 2s and 3s. And so hopefully the information that we share tonight is helpful as we are all on this journey. As Emily acknowledged, we're all going through a lot. A lot has transpired in the last couple of weeks that may have been impacting our mental health or the mental health of loved ones. So we want to make sure that we are taking care of ourselves. Dr. Jackson, you may advance the slide. Next one, please. All right. So first we want to talk about what is mental health. So mental health is the state of mental well-being. It's how we cope with life's stressors, because we all know there are definitely going to be stresses in life, but it's how we cope with those stressors, how we realize and recognize our strengths and abilities, how we learn and work well. Because if we are in a state of mental crisis or mental illness, maybe that impacts our learning and our working, because we are focused on things that are happening, or anxiety or depression. And so it's difficult to really focus on learning and working well. And then how we contribute and show up in our community. So are we engaging in community activities like we did before? Are we withdrawing from social gatherings and social interactions with family and friends? So all of those things impact our mental health. May advance to the next slide. So, what is mental illness or mental disorders? So, these are diagnosable health conditions. So, oftentimes you'll hear words like anxiety, depression, ADHD, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. So, all of those are what are considered diagnosable health conditions, either by your primary care provider, a nurse practitioner, or a therapist or psychologist. And so it affects the way that we think and behave. It may disrupt a person's ability to work or attend school, to carry out daily activities. Sometimes people will talk about it's difficult for them to get out of bed, right? It's difficult for them to attend and focus at work or school. And then engaging in satisfying relationships. Maybe you're withdrawing from family and friends. Maybe you're being argumentative with family or friends, or irritable and you're not exactly sure why. So we're going to talk about like when you may want to access help for yourself or a loved one. You may advance the slide. So some general like signs and symptoms you may be looking out for. So physical signs, those headaches, stomach aches. Am I tense? So it might be in my shoulders, in my face, in my arms, where I feel that muscle tension. Am I having a difficult time falling asleep and staying asleep? And even if I get enough sleep, am I just feeling in generally fatigued, right? I'm just in generally tired. Then you might also notice some behavioral signs. So social withdrawal, increased risky behaviors like using substances. You might see missing or skipping school, or changes, drastic changes and shifts in academic or work performance. And then those emotional and psychological signs and symptoms, maybe experiencing anxiety or worry and you're not sure why. Maybe you're irritable or short-tempered, or feeling sad or depressed. And when we think of sad or depressed, you're thinking, how long have I been in this state of sadness, right? Has it been, 1 or 2 days, or has it been, a couple of weeks to a couple of months, right? Am I feeling overwhelmed or out of control? Am I thinking or talking about like hurting myself, or am I like hearing others think about hurting themselves? So those are just some signs and symptoms you want to be looking out for, if we're talking about ourselves, if we're talking about our child or another loved one. May advance the slide. So when we're thinking of elementary school students, not sure how many of us have elementary school students, but if you see that your student has like sudden like separation anxiety, difficulty going to school and separating from their parent, maybe they don't want to go to school because they're afraid something might happen while they're at school. Maybe you get to school and they're clinging to your leg, or they're crying. They don't want to get out of the car, right? Or generalized anxiety. They're just feeling anxious or worried and they're unsure why they're feeling anxious or worried. You might be looking at inattention, where they're just unable to stay focused, or hyperactivity. They might be jumping off your furniture, or fidgety and unable to sit still for extended periods of time. And then you're noticing any like behavior changes, maybe temper tantrums or outburst. So in elementary, oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Can you go back one? Sorry. Okay. So in elementary school students, you just want to pay attention to those signs and symptoms and like keep a journal or jot them down in case like you're unsure if something is going on so you can keep track. Now you may advance the slide, I'm sorry. And then as your students grow and become middle schoolers, some things you might be looking out for is like moodiness or mood swings. If they're having those extreme highs and lows, one minute they're like really happy and excited, and then the next minute they're like sad and depressed and down, might be an indication that something is wrong. They're developing eating concerns. So maybe you notice like a change in their eating habits. Maybe they're binge eating or overeating, or maybe they're hiding food, or maybe you can see that they're restricting eating. We all know, like with social media and social norms around eating and body image, that grows in middle school. And then you'll see like anxiety and depression becoming more prevalent, again, due to possibly like bullying. Are they experiencing peer pressure? Are they engaging in risk-taking behaviors? In middle school is where like students are really trying to get to know who they are and who their friends are and where they fit in. And so they may be experiencing like peer pressure or bullying, which can lead to that anxiety and depression. And then for high school students, you may see what we just talked about in middle school students, but also like extreme anxiety or depression to where they're engaging in like suicidal ideations or behaviors, like self-harm. Here we talk about academic stressors and, especially in like 11th and 12th grade, and thinking about like being college focused and getting into college and college applications and ensuring they have good grades. And if they're participating in sports, all of those things, become stressors. And then also you see an increased use of substances. So vaping, marijuana, there have been research studies consistently about fentanyl and ensuring like engaging in those like high risk-taking behaviors in high school, because they have access usually to transportation or they have friends, so they're able to like access things more easily. And I'm going to turn it back over to Emily.
Okay, thank you, Shannon, for that overview. So now we'll get into some of the kind of myth versus facts, maybe misconceptions, or where our understanding of mental health and mental disorders lies. So myth versus fact, mental illness is rare. So in the chat, if you just want to put agree or disagree with the statement, mental illness is rare. If you have any thoughts or anything's coming to mind, what do you think? Okay, and you can click through. Yeah, I see a lot of disagreeing. So that's great. That's yeah, so that's one of the main things we're trying to emphasize in reducing the stigma. Is there's a lot of perceptions that, mental illness is, it can't happen to me, it can't happen to my family, it happens to other people. When in reality, and Dr. Jackson, you could advance the slide. We have some data on the next page. So this is national data that indicates, you can see in our children in particular, age 3 to 17, 2016 to 2019, and typically the mental health data lags a few years behind. But almost 10% of our students experience ADHD. similar to anxiety, behavior problems at 9%, and depression 4.4% for our students 3 to 17 years on the national scale. And if you want to advance another slide, this is data from Prince George's County specifically. So each year, the state of Maryland puts out a youth behavior risk survey that surveys middle and high school students. But I just pulled data from our high school tables from 2022 and 2023. So our input from our high school students indicated that 38% felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks or more in a row. And when we're talking about mental health diagnoses or disorders, that's often the threshold when in terms of length of time. You know, we all have different things that we go through and periods of stress, stressful days. But when it happens very often for 2 weeks or more, that's kind of one of the indicators that tells us maybe it's time to seek help. And we'll talk more about that later. But that's the 38% of our high school students reported that. And also 26% reported that their mental health was mostly or always not good. And then in terms of suicide risk, and I'm sorry, those two data points, the 38 and 26%, those were pretty consistent between this year's and the last reported data, which was 2020 to 2021. Whereas these statistics were actually decreased for our suicide risk attempts or contemplating. So 16.8% of our high school students seriously considered attempting suicide in the past 12 months of the survey. And then 10% actually attempted suicide 1 or more times in the 12 months before the survey. So this tells us that it is not rare. If you're having a class of 30 students, 3 of them are likely to have made a suicidal attempt. So that really tells us we need to be talking about this. We need to be open and honest with our children and our students and create those comfortable conversations and environments in our schools so that we can intervene with these students who are feeling this way, and that it's not rare and that it's okay to ask for help. So we can advance the slide again. And Shannon went over a lot of these, but this is just data pulled from our mental health clinicians in our school, as well as Hazel Health. So these are some of the common concerns for Pgcps students. Many of these are very similar to national concerns. So the top 2 mental illnesses nationwide and in Pgcps are depression and anxiety. And then others you can see there, conflicts with others, trauma or negative life events that students need help processing through, anger or emotional regulation, impulse control, aggression, grief, self-esteem, and then, like we said, suicidal ideation and self-harm. Those are some of the most common concerns that we support our students through. Okay, another myth versus fact: mental illness is lifelong. If you want to just put in the chat, agree or disagree, true or false. What are we thinking? Yeah, myth, disagree, false. Yep, we can advance through. So some mental illnesses do require long-term and lifelong care and maintenance and medication, but many of them, and Dr. Jackson, if you just want to advance the slide here, sorry. Really, the sooner an individual gets help, the more likely they are to have a positive outcome. So there are many, and I apologize if you hear any background. I do have kids, so they might get a little loud, but it should be dinner time soon. But so we know that research shows us that the sooner an individual gets help and the earlier on in the problem, the more likely they are to have a positive outcome. And many disorders require a person to take medication or receive therapy for a short amount of time. So a lot of times a therapist will recommend, or a pediatrician or a psychiatrist will recommend that a student undergo a certain treatment plan, and then a reevaluation period happens. And at that time, they determine, is the medication working? Can we start tapering down? Can we start decreasing some of the sessions so that when the student starts to utilize some of the skills in therapy on their own? So it is not always a lifelong situation and a lifelong thing in terms of treatment and therapy requirements. Sometimes it is, and that's okay too. But a lot of times, the earlier we can get our kids help, the better outcome that we'll have. Okay, and then another myth versus fact. We have A person needs to be in crisis to receive help. So we think that's true or false? False, myth, myth. Yeah, you guys are getting it. So we can go ahead and advance the slide. So we know through research that prevention and early intervention, like I said, are key. And there are several strategies that we can do to prevent mental health problems from progressing into disorders in ourselves, and many ways that we can support our scholars in that. And that includes mental health education. So our professional school counselors do social emotional lessons in classrooms where they're really talking about those social emotional learning, how to interact and have positive relationships with others, how to problem solve, how to tap into your own resources. So those are pretty consistent conversations, especially at that early education elementary level, that our counselors are pushing in and providing those lessons and having those small groups. Also, building of coping skills, and I know this is a little hard to see, but I had to put it in here because it is from one of our elementary schools in Pgcps, coping skills from A to Z. So you can see A is affirmations, there's belly breathing, we have exercise over there. So building those skills of those coping skills, helping children to learn what coping skills really work for them, because it's not a one size fits all for coping skills. Students might take differently to different ones of these coping skills. So really building that and encouraging students to try different skills to get through difficult times. Also check-ins with trusted adults such as their parents, family, counselor, teacher. Sleep hygiene is huge for mental health. When we sleep well, our mental health is positively affected. And conversely, when we don't sleep well, it's very difficult for us to regulate our emotions, which, as busy adults, I'm sure you've all kind of experienced that at some point. You're really tired, you get a little snappy. Our students are the same way. Physical activity is also extremely closely linked with our mental health. Research has shown that physical activity has a significant positive effect, and it doesn't have to be running or intense cardio or with weightlifting or anything like that. Just a walk outside, getting your body moving in whatever way that works for you or your scholar. And then practicing gratitude, which we'll talk a little bit about, but daily practices of gratitude. You can go ahead. We'll talk a little bit more about gratitude later. So we also have protected factors. So these are things that prevent mental health disorders from occurring. Not to say that if someone has all these, they definitely won't have a mental health disorder or won't need some help through some things. But these are some protective factors that just make it more likely that an individual might have a positive outcome in terms of their mental health. So connectedness to others, we know those relationships are huge. Effective coping skills, cultural and religious beliefs. So having a strong sense of self and where someone fits into their environment and their culture and religion is a significant protective factor, as well as stable home and community environment. Likewise, hobbies, interests, school teams, school connectedness is also huge for mental health. So students who do feel more connected to their school environment generally report being mentally healthier than students who are more isolated and really don't feel like part of their school community. And then, like we said, those wellness habits and access to care for mental and physical health, because we know there's sometimes some overlap between how we're doing mentally and physically. So taking care of both of those aspects of our lives and our scholars' lives is critical and definitely a protective factor. Okay. So we know that, no matter, we may put in place all of the protective factors and try the mental health education and do all these things, but, you still might need some help with your student, or you still might know somebody who needs some resources or maybe needs some nudging to seek out professional help. So when do you do that? So we want to consider the severity of the presenting problem. So how much does it disrupt the students or the individual's daily life? Does it affect one or more of their major life areas? So academics for our students, work for adults, social life, family relationships, eating, sleeping. So those major life functionings. And then the frequency, how often is it happening? Is the individual feeling this type of way for a whole day, over several weeks? How intense is it? And the duration of time within the episode or the day that it happens. So those are some things to consider in the impact and when to seek help. And then we also have mental health crisis. So what we consider to be a mental health crisis is severe disruptive behavior. And Dr. Jackson, if you want to advance one. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. If someone is being aggressive or threatening others, self-injurious behaviors, acute psychosis, so that means hearing or seeing things that are not present, suicidal thoughts, and threats to harm self or others. So any one of these warrants a crisis response in the family unit or in the community or school. And we'll talk more about the options for that and how we support students in PGCPS in these kinds of situations. Go ahead. Okay, so talking to your child about mental health. So we know that these conversations can be difficult. It's something that, maybe your parent didn't talk to you about, and you're kind of like, what is this whole mental health thing? Because it has generated a lot of buzz in the past decade or so. And I do think that more people are talking about it than when I was growing up. So it can be kind of challenging for us as parents to figure out how do we talk to our child about something that our parents maybe didn't talk to us about. So we have just a few strategies. So how to start the conversation. So making some time and space without any pressure or expectations. So just kind of bringing up the topic in a general way. And you can even use this information. So you can say, hey, I sat in on a presentation and I learned that 38% of students felt sad or hopeless in the past 2 weeks in our county. Is that something that you've ever felt, or is that something that you see with your peers? So kind of giving maybe something that you saw in the news or heard about in PGCPS and using that versus, asking a student, hey, how's your mental health right now? That can be a little bit daunting, but maybe bringing it up in a more natural, conversational way. And consider the time that you're bringing it up really non-confrontational time. So maybe you're doing something else, you're cooking, or you're in the car and you don't have to look each other in the eye because that can be a little uncomfortable, especially for the first time talking about something like this. And just letting the conversation flow naturally. And it's likely that, the first time you bring this up, if you haven't talked to your child about mental health or some of these things before, it might be uncomfortable and it might take a few conversations. It's not going to be a one and done conversation. So revisiting that, especially if you notice something different in your child. Hey, remember when we talked about all those students that reported feeling that way? I've noticed that you seem a little sad that way recently. Do you want to talk about it? Or can I link you to somebody else to talk about it? And also being sensitive to their mood. Sometimes they're just not feeling that conversation. You just have to revisit it as long as it's safe to do so at a different time. And then start slowly, to think about it as a drip, drip, drip. We're not flooding them with information and conversation, but it's something that we're doing throughout their life, essentially. Okay, next slide. And also, I know this is difficult because as adults, we often want to problem solve. We jump right in. We want to help our kids, but really taking the time to listen and just not saying anything, not offering any solutions, but really just listening non-judgmentally, letting them get it all out there, acknowledging and validating your child or your scholar's feelings. And we call it sometimes name it to tame it. So if students have a name for something that they're feeling, that can be something that they can picture tackling. Whereas a lot of times, especially at the early ages, our students don't know what they're feeling. They're lashing out and they don't know, oh, I am really frustrated because these blocks are not working the way that I want them to. So I see you're really frustrated right now. And we can go to the next slide to kind of talk about that validation. And no judgment here. I have said many of these invalidating statements. They just fly out of your mouth sometimes. But so we have some statements that can be seen as invalidating. Oh, you'll be fine. Don't even worry about it. It's oh, that must be really painful for you. Just registering how different that response would feel to you as an adult if you went to someone else with a problem. And that's similar to how our children might feel if they hear some of these statements and the reframe. So it could be a lot worse. There's a lot of people that have it worse than you. Yeah, that could be very true. But it is also, it doesn't open up the conversation for further further discussion with your scholar on the matter. So you can say, I can see how upset you are. So just some more examples. I'm not going to go through all of them, but just some different reframes to think about. Okay, next slide. And then especially early on, we're talking about growth, trying to encourage our students to adopt a growth mindset. So kind of a fixed mindset, it's more like, I give up, I'm no good at this, I can't make this any better, it's too hard. Some of these things that, you know, can really pile up. And if this becomes a student's or an individual's inner dialogue, it can cause some of those issues such as anxiety, intense fear to even try something new. So really shifting that mindset to how can I grow? What am I missing here? Is there a different way? Can I ask for help? How can I learn how to do this better? Other ways to build positive mental health include showing your own feelings. So we know we're not robots, right? We're human. We all have feelings. We model how we handle our big feelings. And, you know, it's always okay to go back and say, you know, I was not happy in that situation and I didn't speak to that person kindly. I was frustrated and I let my emotions get the better of me. This is how I'm going to fix it with that person. And really, you know, talking through our own feelings and our own interactions with others, you can go, you know, can really help because our children are learning from us constantly. So really modeling how you handle those difficult situations and talking through it that can then become our child's inner monologue too. And encouraging your child to try new things. New things are scary, but avoiding new things and avoiding uncomfortable situations can exacerbate anxiety and make students and us want to avoid them more. So often it is more beneficial to encourage them to try something that's scary in a safe place. And we don't want to like throw them into an unsafe situation by any means, but we want to make sure that they know, you know, we're here for you. We know that this is hard, but this is really going to help you to try this and soon it will be comfortable. So, and going back to that growth mindset for that as well. And modeling kind and generous behaviors with others and showing affection have also been shown to build positive mental health in our children. And then I said I was going to talk more about gratitude. So here we are talking more about gratitude. This is one of the most evidence-based strategies to increase mental health. Expressing gratitude can increase our happiness and decrease depression. It also enhances our empathy for others, improves our self-esteem, and fosters resilience and mental strength. So how do we practice gratitude? There's a bunch of different ways. Some of the simplest ways are a little bullet journal. Every day, write 3 things that you're grateful for, or have your scholar write 3 things that you're grateful for. Or at the end of the day, if you're having a conversation with your child, driving them home from school or at the dinner table or, you know, shuffling to sports practice, whatever, what was the best part of your day so far? What was something that did anyone do anything kind for you today? So kind of giving those prompts can encourage our students to think about the good things that have happened in their day and the things that they're grateful for. And then about the big or the small things, right? You know, we talk a lot about Thanksgiving and very thankful for all the big things, family, but, you know, there's little moments throughout the day that we can just call attention to, and in your own interactions too, like, wow, grandma really helped me today by bringing over that soup when I wasn't feeling well. I'm so grateful for her. So things like that, just really like taking your feelings and your own gratitude and expressing it so that our children can learn from that too. Okay, next slide. And I know we talked a little bit about screen time. We don't have too much time here today, so we're not going to get too deep into it, but we do have a Wellness Wednesday podcast that we talked, or a webinar that we talked about screen time last school year. If you want to tap into that, we'll link the mental health website here to this presentation too. But we know screen time can both positively and negatively affect mental health, and it's really important to encourage limits if our students are not able to limit their own social media behavior and their own screen time, which it is very difficult for our students as they don't have that frontal lobe developed until 25, so they can easily get trapped into the endless scroll of TikTok and Instagram reels and all of that, which can take you deep into comparing your body to somebody else's or comparing your life to somebody else's, and it can really get into a negative spiral. So really setting limits on the time spent and the types of media that your children are able to access. Making sure that media isn't taking the time of adequate sleep. So if your students have a phone, one of the biggest recommendations from pediatricians and psychiatrists is to have that phone outside of the room when it's time to go to sleep, just to have it completely removed from the bedroom so that it's not affecting sleep, because sleep affects all kinds of things ranging from mental health and also memory, how students do academically, and obviously health as well. Also setting media-free times together, times to sit together, whether it's, at a dinner or, having a conversation or a board game night, something like that, for media-free times together, and teaching online safety. And this is covered more in depth on our webinar. There's resources for common sense media so you can know what your children are accessing, if those apps and those resources are safe for your students and scholars. And also talk about treating others with respect, online and offline, and also checking in with your child, asking questions like, have you seen anything online or on social media lately that has upset you? Have you seen anyone being unkind to someone else? Because we know that cyberbullying often happens through social media and on those phones as well. So really checking in with our students about that is critical as well. So I know that was a lot, and there's a lot of strategies and information around mental health, but we do want to focus a lot on the resources available to us in Prince George's County Public Schools and in our community. So to that end, I will turn it back over to Ms. Bell.
Thank you. Miss Dr. Jackson, thank you. So when we're looking at supports for students and families, first we're going to look at school-based mental health supports. Then we'll look at, we do have evening counseling centers, which we'll briefly go over. Then we'll talk about community resource centers, Hazel Health, our telehealth program. You can access the website or email that email address if you have any questions about mental health. Audrey, Emily, and I share that email. And then we have Administrative Procedure 2950 that talks about crisis and suicide risk assessment that is followed throughout our district. So we'll break those down. So for school-based mental health professionals, each of our schools is staffed with professional school counselors, and then school psychologists and mental health clinicians that are provided by our community partners. And we'll talk a little bit more about where our community partners come from. We also have pupil personnel workers, and school nurses. And we forgot one, Emily, we have in our community schools, the community school coordinators that also support mental health and accessing resources for families as well. So our community partnerships come to us by two ways. So the first one is by a RFP directly with Prince George's County, where we have been working with these partners for several years now. They've been providing counseling services, and initially it was just in some of our schools, but as Dr. Jackson said when we first started, mental health in Maryland has received a big push lately. And so we have been able to access additional community partners, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. There are links to each of these community partners. They are community partners that we are confident that can meet the needs of the students and families that we are servicing. If you're looking for specific resources, La Clinica has Spanish-speaking clinicians. So if you're Spanish speaking and need someone in your native language, they have access to those. We have April May, who primarily focuses on early elementary or like preschool age. So we have community resources, and you can reach out to either Emily, Audrey, or I to talk about if you're looking for something specific. So if you'll advance the next slide. So this past year, we gained new community partners through the Maryland Consortium of Coordinated Community Supports. And so what that allowed was for mental health clinicians to be placed in each of our schools. I know it's not a perfect process yet. We are still working on it, but we are looking to achieve at least one mental health clinician in each of our schools, pre-K to 12, so that our scholars have access to mental health services right in their buildings. We also have, and we'll talk a little bit more about Hazel Health, our virtual telehealth program, crisis response as well. Those clinicians and both our community partnerships and our Maryland Consortium provide individual and group counseling. They can also provide family counseling and case management. They work with our crisis intervention teams within our schools if there is a scholar in crisis. And then we have some community partners that support specific populations. Like we have Pass for Families that work specifically with foster and adoptive families. So again, if you have a question about a specific ask, then we'll be able to, you can consult with us and we'll be able to hopefully point you in the right direction. So Hazel Health is one of the programs that is coming through the consortium. Hazel Health is unique as it is no cost to families. They will ask for your insurance information if you have it, but they will not bill your insurance. They will not ask for a copay. So it's of no cost to parents. They are virtual sessions, and you can get virtual physical as well as mental health at home or at school. And then they cover all topics like anxiety, depression, grief and loss, positive coping skills. They are short term, and if they decide that your scholar needs additional support, then they link with the family in order to like connect you and work with you to find a local provider. So Hazel Health is accessible to all of our students across the district. Next slide, please. We also have Prosper, which is an app, and if you click on that QR code, you'll be able to download the app. And so in the app, you'll be able to track your mood, track healthy habits, identify a supportive community. You can track and identify like daily sleep goals, phone habits, like are you exercising, like are you journaling? So it's an app that, can provide some psychoeducation about, mental health as well. But again, it's an app. And so if you find that in tracking those things that maybe you need additional help, or you're downloading it for your scholar and you're checking it and maybe, noticing some things, please reach out to one of our community partners or Hazel Health. Next slide. In Prince George's County, the health department also has a running list of behavioral health services. So it is called the PGC Health Zone. So if you Google that, you'll be able to, it comes up with a map. You type in your zip code and it will give you community resources that are closest to you. Again, that's a caveat. We have not vetted them. It's coming through the health department. Our community partners are on the list. But again, if you're looking for something that is accessible right in your neighborhood, this could be a place that you could start to identify what is available in your neighborhood. Next slide. There are also several youth services bureaus that provide low cost or no cost in-person and virtual counseling. They do individual, group, and family counseling. They often have parenting programs as well. They have screening for substance abuse or use, as well as counseling, crisis intervention. They work together with the family if you need a referral. They often provide tutoring services or school-based mental health groups. And the next slide will just provide you with links and information about where those youth services bureaus are located in Bowie, College Park, District Heights, Greenbelt, and Laurel. Next slide, please. And we won't play the video tonight, Dr. Jackson, but when we're talking about crisis response, iMind has a mobile crisis response team that will respond to your home if you or your scholar or somebody you know is having a mental health crisis. It's of no cost to families, and they'll also provide post-crisis care follow-up. So, and a crisis doesn't look like, somebody always like suicidal ideations or self-harm or acting out and, they have broken property or something like that. If you have a scholar that you're having a hard time getting to school and you've tried everything, like they will also come out and support that as well. So while that might not look like a crisis, like, oh, like I don't know what to do at this moment crisis, it's still a crisis to them, and they'll still come out and provide the service. They'll still work with the family to try to get to the root cause of why your scholar isn't attending school, and then follow up to 60 days afterwards. Next slide, please. I think that we'll play the video. And then we just have some resources for crisis lines. So the crisis line for National Suicide Prevention is 988. There is a crisis counselor accessible 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, that you can reach out to for community resources. If you don't have access to the PGC health zone, you can dial 211 and they will give you that information. If you have a scholar that doesn't like talking, the Suicide Lifeline also has a chat that is also staffed with a licensed clinician who will be able to support them through chat. You can also chat in Spanish. And then the Trevor Project supports our LGBTQ plus population through chat, text, or call. So they have clinicians or people on staff, specifically if you have a scholar that identifies as LGBTQ plus, and they have specific training with those scholars. Next slide. And then just some additional resources we want to leave you with. So our mental health webpage is full of like podcasts that have been done around mental health topics. It has mental health resources and access to the crisis line information. And acknowledging that there has been a lot going on with our immigrant families, there is a website for that has immigrant family resources, but also specific to mental health as well. And then Mental Health Matters or Children's Mental Health Matters is an online resource directory of like toolkits and activities that you can support children across the lifespan. And it addresses a variety of topics of children's mental health. So I know we had opened it up for questions.
And I have been trying to keep up in the chat. My fingers have been moving while Miss Bell's been talking. Yeah. So just I see Dolores.
Yeah, Dolores, do you want to come off mute and ask your question?
Good evening. Thank you for the information. It's always it's a lot of information that's always very helpful. My question, of course, and Emily, thank you for answering those questions, because I was asking a lot of questions about the MOU versus the contract, because I know that we have a looming deficit, right? And so I'm asking the question more so about the potential that we may have to have, excuse me, cuts in the budget, but to make sure that part of the superintendent's platform was to focus on mental health, right? And I wanted to make sure while I'm looking for the budget, when I go and advocate tomorrow, I want to be very clear, right? You all can cut wherever you need to, but what we know we need is the services for mental health. And what I just wanted to make sure, because in looking at the presentation, I couldn't tell like who out of the list was the MOU and who were actually coming through the consortium. And so just wanting to get a better understanding, because it's also not laid out in the contract, I mean, in the budget like that either. But I want to make sure that when we're out here advocating, that everyone keeps talking about this is important, but some of the things that people don't really see as the true impact, because it's not the math or the science and it's not on a report card, they don't see the impact of the service. But I also don't feel like, for whatever reason, it is being communicated enough to us on the schoolhouse level about the resource. And so I know that's not you all's world, but we have to do a better job in making sure that what you all are providing, that people know is accessible to them. And I just want to know, how do we help you get that word out? You know, because we don't work for Pgcps, but if I have to go to every board meeting and scream from the mountaintop, like keep the money in the budget, as well as, you know, make sure that these parents have this information, I'll do that. But I just need to know, do you all know? Because they're putting out there that we're going to fight for it, but have you heard anything as it relates from the state level to where we are of any potential impact, right, from funding that may be lost that can impact these services?
So I will say that on Friday, I was at Bowie State. And the senator who is over the district, Fort Washington, Oxon Hill, was there, and I asked that specific question, that considering that it sounds like Maryland will have a shortfall, will consortium funding be cut? And what she is advocating is that we reach out and talk about why consortium funding should not be cut and how it has benefited PGCPS. And so that is one thing. I know the school counseling department was also talking about as well. because they're the one who hosted the forum. And so more information about that should be coming out soon, because that was my specific ask is you've given us this money, and with the shortfall, how do we continue to provide these services if the money is not available in the budget?
Right. And my concern is if we don't know, like you'll have that information, but the most powerful partner that you have is us as the parent, right?
Absolutely.
If you get that information to the parents because we need it, right? Because we want to fight with you, then, you know, we can talk to every single senator and delegate in the world, but if I don't have the facts and the resources, then I'm just saying, don't take it away from me, right? So I'm hoping that there are some talk points like, hey, this is the benefit, this is the impact, right? There should be some impact statements all over our website.
Right.
Yeah,
So, go ahead, Emily. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was just going to provide clarity that, our mental health clinicians that we mentioned, a lot of them are funded through our community schools budget. And then there's another, we were using ESSER money to fund those, which has since sunset. So that is something that we're advocating for to be included in the budget to keep that resource for all students. So just so you have, the information about what we're advocating for in student services. And it's always, like you said, you are definitely our most valuable partner as parents. And it is it's received a different way when it comes from a parent who has a personal investment in the mental health services in their own child attending school and receiving those services. So thank you so much for your advocacy. And we are hopeful that the Maryland Consortium, they did just open up another round of funding for the 25-26 school year. So our team recently went through all of those proposals. We tried our best to coordinate with the many schools we have that had consortium partners to figure out what was working, what's not working. So we did try to solicit a lot of feedback regarding because our role was to provide a letter of support to organizations so that they could apply for Maryland funding. So we are not the end all be all of saying who gets the funding and who doesn't, but they do need to come to us and ask, hey, is this something that you see your students benefiting from? So we just kind of wrapped up that whole process. So we will see what happens and remain hopeful that some of those services and resources are continued.
I appreciate your thoughtfulness and wanting to advocate with us. And so I hear the need to have just some like bullet points for you to share whenever you're going out and advocating, like maybe those statistics and what our common concerns in Prince George's are and how we're meeting the needs of our scholars.
Yeah, and because I'm registered for tomorrow.
Okay.
You can
I'll
get
be
me
logging on.
something before my 7 o'clock tomorrow. I'll add it to my speech.
Thank you. And I see Ms. Davis raised your hand. I'm glad you did because I did want to address that. The question was, will Hazel Health, and this applies to, I think, any mental health clinician, counselor, will the provider give insights to the parents, or is everything private? And it's a tricky balance because we want therapy to be a safe space for the child. If the child feels that the provider is just going to their parent for, with every concern, they're not going to feel safe sharing certain things. That being said, it is obviously beneficial for parents to know different strategies, what are the common concerns, or, how can I support? So in that way, I know our mental health clinicians and school counselors try to maintain an open line of communication without breaching that confidentiality. But it is a tricky balance. And I will bring it up to Hazel because I'm not sure how much parent collaboration happens following each session, or if they have a set structure for how they follow up with parents. So that's something that I can get more information on. But Ms. Vanmika, I did want to give you the opportunity to share verbally.
Yes, and I did specifically ask that question because I was seeking out some of the services. I'm sorry. Thank you so much for the presentation. My name is Mika Davis. My son goes to Brandywine Elementary and he does have an IEP, and we were seeking out some of those supports, but when we found out that there was not going to be any sort of collaboration. He's 5 and has a severe phonetic deficit, so it's that's not a route that we can go. So that was disappointing, but I wasn't sure if that was just not incorrect information, which is why I wanted to ask. And just also something maybe to consider, there are parents within our school system that would love to collaborate to help, with our children's social emotional learning, but that does make it difficult, because if we don't have those insights, how can we know what to do at home? And then circling back to just something else that I did address, I know that there is a social emotional learning curriculum in the county. I haven't seen it at our school. I don't know. I'm not sure how it is being played out. But I do believe that it's something that our school and our school system can benefit from in the elementary sector, because it's laying a foundation, and it would be beneficial. I brought this up at the conference back in November, but it would be beneficial for it to be a family thing as well, so that there's a connection at home as well, so the kids just aren't maybe grasping getting these insights at school, but also they're taking it home and the parents already have an understanding of what they're speaking of. So like, in essence, laying a foundation so that we aren't catching kids in middle school and they haven't been able to utilize these skills.
Absolutely. Sorry, I forgot. Took me a
No.
second to find the unmute button. But thank you for sharing. I definitely, and I can't speak for all elementary schools, but I know often it's the case where guidance is embedded as a special, or there's like a rotation of counselors going in and providing that social emotional learning lesson. But I know it varies depending on, we do acknowledge that we have a shortage of school counselors in Prince George's County Public Schools, so that impacts things as well. But definitely, I can definitely hear the need for increased communication about what's happening in that social emotional learning lesson, because if you can touch base with your scholar about it at home, that reinforces the skill that they need. So I definitely appreciate that request and bringing that up as well. I will try to get more information on that too. We do, and on the Office of Mental Health, there's a little bit of overlap between social emotional learning and mental health, but a lot of times that's the Office of School Counseling that kind of deals more directly with those social emotional learning lessons and supports. But we do collaborate on a lot, so I can get more information on that. I see. So I also see in the chat. Thank you, Shane. I do appreciate the feedback. So it says Hazel, sometimes feedback after each session and others limited feedback upon request. So might depend on the clinician's personal style or, their perception of what the need is. But I can definitely, Hazel is a great partner for us. They're really receptive to our feedback. So this really helps. So this helps. We'll go to Hazel and we will ask, what is the plan? Are clinicians told to follow up with parents at every set time? So we're definitely taking notes, and we will bring this up to them, because we want to be consistent too. We don't want parents to have to ask for feedback if it's possible for clinicians to be able to touch base every couple weeks or so.
We'll wait one more minute. Does anybody have another question before we close out our presentation for the night? So if you have additional questions, maybe after you review the resource or Dr. Jackson sends out the PDF, please let us know. Emily and I's information is on the slide, so you can just reach out, even if it's just a consultation. So to close us out for the night, I just want to do a waterfall activity. So in the chat, I just want you to type a word or phrase that describes your learning from this evening. You're not going to hit send quite yet. I'm going to give you about a minute to write your word or phrase. And then we're going to press send all at the same time, and it's going to be this cascading waterfall of learning. Great, so send your messages. The gratitude, informed, encouraged, helpful, positive, excellent and informative, enlightening, hopeful. So I just want to thank you this evening for having us. Thank you, Dr. Jackson and her team, for having us this evening. I hope you guys found that it was helpful and you walked away with some concrete resources to be able to meet the needs of both your scholar and your family.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pasco and Ms. Bell. What an outstanding presentation. So much information, resources for our families. We will be PDFing and sharing this PowerPoint on our website, and the video will be shared also in, okay, my team has helped me, the school systems portal. But you will please let other families know that this awesome presentation will be available on the school systems page as well. These are the sessions that are coming up, and we hope that you all will join us again for additional sessions. Again, mental health is one of our superintendent's priorities. Very important information that we heard tonight, and powerful resources for us to utilize to help our families and help ourselves as adults. And the next one coming up on the 25th will be another priority. It'll be all about transportation. So we look forward to you joining us again. And all of these sessions will be advertised by our Division of Communications. Just want to thank you again to our wonderful presenters, our simultaneous interpreters. I could see them working in their room. And we just, again, appreciate everyone. We dropped into the chat the evaluation for this session tonight. We really appreciate your feedback because we like to share it with our presenters as well. We all plan to grow through our experiences, and so your feedback helps us improve what we do. So again, thank you. And from the Department of Family and Community Partnerships, you see all of our team there. Please reach out to us if you need us for any support. Again, April Shannon, Parent Leadership. She helps all schools develop whatever type of parent leadership organization they desire. Winsome Falvey leads our Parent Cafe initiative, where they have intimate conversations in school communities and take parents through some sessions to talk about their strengths, their challenges as parents and leaders in their family. Mr. Ortiz works with diversity and father engagement across the district. And then, of course, the other part of our department is community and business partnerships. So we have Mary Robinson as a supervisor, Ronald Wilson, who deals with strategic partnerships, MOUs, business partners, faith-based partners, Janice Cook, who leads our volunteer efforts, so that making sure that every school has a cadre of trained volunteers who've been screened and who can help us carry out the mission of Prince George's County. So thank you all again. We encourage you to enjoy the rest of your snowy evening. We don't know what it's going to be like tomorrow, but we hope you enjoy your day. Hope you enjoy your children and your family. And again, we hope to see you again. Thank you for joining us tonight, and have a good, safe evening.
Gracias, buenas noches.
Buenas noches.
Thank you, Dr. Jackson.
You are certainly welcome. Thank you all for the wealth of information and resources. This is just so powerful. It's like, I keep saying there's no way any of us could think we don't have supports. Look at the information you shared with us tonight. Thank you.
Thank
Truly
you.
appreciate it.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. You too.